in the quiet hours before dawn, during the blessed month of Ramadan, there is a moment that many people overlook. It is a small window of time, yet within it lies immense mercy and blessing. This moment is known as Suhoor, the meal taken before the fast begins. It is not exactly what we would normally call breakfast. Breakfast usually comes after the sun rises, but in Ramadan, our rhythm changes. Our days are shaped around worship, patience, and discipline. So the meal we eat before the break of dawn becomes something deeply meaningful. It becomes preparation, not only for the body, but also for the soul. This early meal is not merely a cultural habit. It is something beloved in the Sunnah of the Prophet, says Al-Laman. He encouraged it strongly, and he reminded his companions that even a small amount eaten before dawn carries tremendous blessing. He said that people should take the pre-dawn meal because there is barakah in it. Now pause for a moment and reflect on that word, barakah. Barakah is often translated simply as blessing, but the meaning of barakah in Arabic is much deeper than that. Linguistically, the root of the word carries the meaning of something that becomes firm, steady, and abundant. Scholars explain that the word is connected to the image of a camel that kneels down and settles firmly in place. When a camel sits and does not move, it remains stable and grounded. From this image comes the meaning of barakah, something that stays, something that remains, something that grows in goodness without disappearing. So when we say there is barakah in Suhoor, it means that the nourishment you take before dawn carries a special kind of goodness. It is not only physical energy, it is a form of divine support placed within the food by Allah. During the long hours of fasting, when hunger begins to appear and the body starts to feel weakness, that small meal taken before dawn continues to sustain you. The strength seems to last longer than expected. The patience seems easier than imagined. The day feels lighter than it should. This is the nature of barakah. Sometimes a little becomes enough. Sometimes a small act carries a huge reward. Sometimes a few moments of obedience fill an entire day with goodness. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ emphasized this meal so strongly. He also taught another important principle regarding the fast. He said that the people will continue to remain upon goodness as long as they hasten to break their fast. This teaching highlights something beautiful about Islam. The religion does not encourage unnecessary hardship. Islam is a path of balance. While fasting requires patience and discipline throughout the day, once the time of sunset arrives, the believer is encouraged not to delay the breaking of the fast. The moment the time of Maghrib enters, the fast should be broken. Some people misunderstand this concept. They imagine that delaying the breaking of the fast somehow increases their reward. They may wait 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or even longer before eating or drinking. But this is not from the Sunnah. The Sunnah teaches us to break the fast close to the correct time without unnecessary delay. There are several wisdoms behind this guidance. The first reason is that it allows the believer to approach prayer calmly. When the fast is broken promptly, a person can regain a little energy and then go to the Maghrib prayer without rushing or feeling faint. The second reason is moderation in eating. If someone delays the meal for too long, hunger can become overwhelming. And when that happens, the person may begin eating excessively once food is finally served. But when the fast is broken immediately with something small, perhaps a date or a sip of water, the body calms down. The urge to overeat becomes smaller. The third wisdom relates to the heart and the tongue. When people sit for long periods, waiting to break their fast, conversations begin. Some of these conversations are beneficial, but many drift into idle talk. Ramadan is meant to train the heart. It teaches us awareness of Allah in every moment. So the Sunnah gently protects us from falling into unnecessary distractions. By breaking the fast promptly, the believer keeps the evening focused on prayer, gratitude, and remembrance. Now let us return again to the time before dawn. Allah describes the beginning of the fasting time in the Quran using a powerful metaphor. He says that believers may eat and drink until the white thread of dawn becomes distinct from the black thread of night. This description is poetic and precise at the same time. Imagine standing outside before sunrise. The sky is still dark, but slowly, very slowly, a thin line of light begins to appear on the horizon. It is faint at first, almost like a delicate thread stretching across the edge of the sky. That thin line of light is what the Quran refers to as the white thread, and the darkness of the night beside it is the black thread. When the two become distinguishable, the fast begins. In the time of the Prophet Sallallahu, people could observe this with their own eyes. They lived close to the natural world. They could see the gradual transition between night and dawn. But today, our lives are very different. Most of us do not look at the horizon to determine the beginning of the fast. Instead, we rely on printed calendars, mobile applications, digital clocks, and notifications. The only white light many of us see at that time is the light coming from our phone screens. Times have changed, and Islam allows flexibility to accommodate these changes. However, because we rely on different calendars and different applications, sometimes small differences appear in the timings. One phone may announce the adhan at 1 minute past a certain time, while another phone may give the notification 2 minutes earlier or later. Some calendars may differ by 3 minutes, others by 5. This situation can sometimes create confusion, especially for Muslims living in places where the adhan is not heard publicly. In some Muslim lands, the call to prayer echoes through the streets. When the adhan begins, everyone hears it together. But in many parts of the world today, people rely entirely on digital reminders. So what should a person do if there are small differences in the timings? The scholars remind us that Islam is a religion of mercy. If a person sincerely follows a reliable timetable, their fast is valid. Even if another calendar shows a slightly different time, the person is not blamed for that difference, as long as someone is not absolutely certain that the time of dawn has already begun. There is room for ease. This principle reflects the mercy that Allah has placed within this religion. The goal is not to trap people in anxiety over minutes and seconds. The goal is sincerity, effort, and obedience according to the knowledge available. Still, many scholars advise that a person should stop eating a few minutes before the calculated time of foliage, simply as a precaution. This small buffer creates peace of mind. It protects the fast while still allowing the person to benefit from the blessing of Suhoor. And this practice was also observed by many companions of the Prophet ﷺ who had finished their meal a short time before the prayer began. Sometimes it was only a brief pause, the amount of time it would take to recite a few verses of the Qur'an. Other narrations mention a slightly longer gap, but the important point is that it was not an obligation. The Prophet ﷺ practiced it, yet he did not command every believer to follow the exact same interval. The guiding principle always returns to the verse of the Quran: eat and drink until the appearance of the dawn. As long as the dawn has not begun, the fast has not started. And as long as a believer acts with sincerity and reasonable caution, Allah knows their intention and accepts their effort. The beauty of Ramadan is that even the smallest acts, a sip of water before dawn, a date at sunset, a quiet intention in the heart, become acts of worship. And sometimes those small acts are the very things that carry the greatest barakah. When we reflect on the guidance surrounding fasting, we begin to notice something beautiful about the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. They were not only instructions, but they were also a form of mercy for people who would live in very different circumstances throughout history. During the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, the community was simple. People did not have clocks, digital calendars, or mobile applications that calculated prayer times down to the exact second. Instead, they lived in harmony with the natural rhythms of the world around them. They watched the sky. They observed the movement of the sun. They noticed the gradual shift between darkness and light. And through these natural signs, they understood when the times of prayer began and ended. And because of this reality, the call to prayer, the adhan, served as an important reminder for the community. But it is important to understand that even during that time, there was a special arrangement regarding the adhan before dawn. Many people are surprised to learn that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were two calls to prayer before Fajr. The first call was made earlier in the night, before the actual beginning of the dawn. This call was meant to wake people up. It served as a gentle reminder that the time of fasting was approaching. Those who were sleeping could wake up. Those who wanted to pray, voluntary prayers could do so. And those who wished to eat the meal of Suhoor could prepare themselves. The companion who used to give this early call was Belal ibn Rabah. His voice would echo through the quiet streets of Medina, calling the believers toward awareness. But this was not yet the official start of the fasting time. After some time had passed, the second call to prayer would be made. This call indicated that the true dawn had arrived and that the time for the Fajr prayer had begun. This second call was given by another companion known as Abdullah ibn Maktum. What makes this detail even more interesting is that Abdullah ibn Maktum was blind. Because of this, he relied on others to inform him when the dawn had actually appeared. Sometimes someone would say to him, "The dawn has arrived." Only then would he call the adhan. And occasionally this meant that his adhan might come a little later than the exact moment the dawn appeared. This historical detail carries an important lesson for us. It shows that even in the earliest Muslim community, the exact timing of dawn was not measured with perfect precision down to the second. There was a natural human element involved, and yet despite this slight variation, the fasting of the believers was valid. Their prayers were valid. Their worship was accepted. Why? Because Islam does not demand impossible levels of precision from ordinary people. Instead, it asks for sincerity, effort, and reasonable certainty. This historical practice also helps us understand a narration of the Prophet ﷺ that sometimes confuses people. He once said that if one of you is holding a vessel of food or drink in your hand and you hear the call to prayer, then you should not put it down until you finish what you were already doing. At first glance, this narration might seem to suggest that a person can continue eating or drinking even after hearing the adhan for fire. But scholars have carefully explained the context behind this statement. Many jurists clarified that the Prophet ﷺ was referring to the first adhan, the early call given by Belal. That adhan was not the beginning of the fasting time. It was simply a warning that the time was approaching. So if someone heard that early call while eating or drinking, there was no problem in continuing their meal. However, when the second adhan was given, the one indicating that the dawn had truly arrived, the companions would stop eating immediately. They would even remove food from their mouths if they had already begun chewing. This careful balance shows the seriousness with which the companions approached their worship. But it also shows that Islam provides clarity and compassion rather than confusion. Now, in our modern world, the situation can be slightly different. In many places, Muslims do not hear the adhan from a mosque nearby. Instead, the adhan comes through phone applications, digital clocks, or recorded reminders. Sometimes a person may have several devices in their home. One phone announces the adhan at one time. Another device announces it a minute later. A third calendar on the wall might show a slightly different time altogether. Families sometimes laugh about the situation because it is very common. In a house with many people, there might be many phones, and each one might call the adhan at a slightly different moment. Which one should a person follow? The scholars remind us again of the principle of mercy. If a person follows a reliable timetable and stops eat according to that time, their fast is valid. Small differences between calendars do not invalidate the fast. These differences often happen because various organizations calculate dawn using slightly different scientific methods. Some measure the angle of the sun below the horizon differently. Others use local observation methods. All of these calculations aim to approximate the moment when the first light of dawn appears. Because these calculations are approximations, small variations are inevitable. So rather than creating anxiety over every minute, the guidance is simple. Follow a trustworthy schedule and act with sincerity. Still, scholars often advise a cautious approach. They recommend that a person stop eating a few minutes before the calculated Fajr time. This small precaution ensures that the fast is safe, even if the calculation is slightly off. It is not an obligation. It is simply a recommended measure for peace of mind. Now let us turn our attention to another aspect of fasting, that the prophets in the month once of breaking the fast promptly at sunset. When the sun disappears below the horizon and the time of Maghrib enters, the fast is complete. The believer is encouraged to break the fast without unnecessary delay. This act itself is an expression of obedience. Throughout the day, the believer refrains from food and drink purely for the sake of Allah, and when the moment of sunset arrives, they accept Allah's permission to eat again. Both actions are forms of worship. Refraining is worship, and eating at the right time is also worship. Some people assume that delaying the breaking of the fast increases their reward. They might wait 20 minutes or even longer after sunset before eating. But this practice does not align with the guidance of the Prophet Sallallahu. He taught that goodness remains calling among people as long as they hasten to break their fast. Breaking the fast quickly carries several benefits. First, it restores energy gently so that the believer can perform the Maghrib prayer with focus and calmness. Second, it prevents excessive hunger from building up. And when hunger becomes too intense, people may overeat once food is finally served. Third, it protects the evening from unnecessary distractions. Anyone who has attended a large iftar gathering knows how this pattern often unfolds. Just before sunset, everyone sits quietly. There is anticipation in the air. People wait patiently for the moment to break their fast. But once the food appears and everyone begins eating, the atmosphere changes quickly. Energy returns to the body. Laughter begins. Conversations become lively. There is nothing wrong with joy and laughter. These are blessings from Allah. But sometimes the conversations can drift into long periods of idle talk. Ramadan is meant to help believers guard their time and their speech. So by breaking the fast promptly, praying Maghrib, and then continuing the evening with purpose, the believer keeps their heart connected to the spirit of the month. Another beautiful sunnah is the simplicity of how the fast is broken. The Prophet Zaman often broke his fast with dates or water. Not a large meal, not a feast, just something small to mark the end of the fast. Even a single sip of water is enough. This detail carries an important reminder for our modern lifestyles. Many people today imagine that breaking the fast requires a large table filled with food. Plates of rice, meat, desserts, drinks, and many other dishes are prepared. While sharing food with family is a wonderful blessing, the essence of the sunnah is simplicity. The fast can be broken with something very small. Sometimes a person might even be traveling when the time of Metset arrives. Imagine someone driving home while the Maghrib time enters. They may not be sitting at a table. They may not have access to a full meal. In that situation, simply taking a sip of water or eating a small date is enough to fulfill the sunnah. Many people keep a small bottle of water in their car during Ramadan for this reason. It allows them to break their fast immediately when the time arrives, even if they are still on the road. This small act keeps them connected to the practice of the prophets of the prophets. And again, the beauty of this religion appears in its balance. Islam does not demand elaborate rituals or complicated procedures. A sip of water, a quiet intention, a moment of gratitude. These simple actions carry immense spiritual weight. And when a believer practices them with sincerity, their ordinary moments become acts of worship.